Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and you're watching The Brown Feminist. In today's video, we will be talking about clinical trials agreement or clinical study agreement and what exactly these are and what is your role when you are reviewing it as a study coordinator. So without further ado, let's get into it. So a clinical trial agreement or a clinical study agreement is essentially a legal document or a contract that takes place between two organizations. I will give you a couple of examples to understand what kind of contract this is and what the contents of it might be. So in scenario one, let's say there is a pharma company who has developed a drug, has completed the preclinical studies and maybe a phase 1 study, and now has come to your hospital site where you work as a research coordinator. Now, the first thing they have done is gone through site selection process, made sure this is even an adequate site and an adequate PI, principal investigator or clinician scientist to work with. After initial discussion, they have to talk about the logistics of what their timeline expectation is, how much they're able to reimburse the site for conducting the study, and everything else such as the study related materials and costs, who will be bearing it in case of something goes wrong, who will be taking legal responsibility and safety responsibility, who will be responsible for informing the regulatory bodies such as the FDA or Health Canada about it. Now, once these things start to be finalized, the PI usually has a discussion with the main person at the CRO or the pharma company. Upon verbal confirmation, then they actually send over something that is more of a legal document or a contract, and this is your CTA or CSA. Now, typically for hospitals, there is a big legal department. So the legal department would assign a lawyer, somebody who is a contracts person, a contracts lawyer who would be reviewing this document for all the legal risks that the organization is taking over. However, there will be some things that are very study specific that they will also need your input on. So the PI and the study coordinator together will also review it or individually review it and give any kind of changes they want. From your end, now this brings us to part 2 of the video, is once these steps have all taken place and you know that the next step is to get the contract signed, and this can actually happen alongside processing ethics and things like that, but usually the contract should be signed before going to submit the initial ethics submission. So at this point, what is the role that you will play as a clinical research coordinator or as a study coordinator in order to give legal and the PI your thumbs up that, okay, from your end, everything looks good to proceed? As a study coordinator, in this particular scenario, one of the most important things for you to review would be the budget. Now, in order to make sure that you can make a comment on the budget, you first have to thoroughly review the protocol and see what are the expenses that your team will incur in order to implement this study. For example, how many hours of study coordinator or research staff time is being going into this project? How many PI hours are going into it? What kind of resources and materials are going into it? How many patients they expect you to recruit and how hard it's going to be to recruit patients in their target population. How many tests that will need to be done, like blood tests, other diagnostic tests, CT tests, MRIs, all of that stuff. Is it going to be paid for at your site by you and then you will be reimbursed or not? In case there is screen failure, how much are you going to get reimbursed? Are you going to at least get reimbursed for maybe the first initial consenting and stuff? Or if the patient has to drop out due to developing severe side effects, how much are you going to get reimbursed for that particular patient? So all of these things are things you have to review. Now, after you review them, of course, your job is to ensure that after your team has paid all of the finances and you have some good leg room, that means you are calculating for, when this study comes to me, I will have to pay a chunk of my salary, a chunk of my boss's salary, a chunk of the other research assistant salary, all the materials for the study, all the shipping costs, all the diagnostic tests. If there is any money going to the patient reimbursement costs, The REB will be charging something. Every department, like the pharmacy, might be charging something for dispensing the drugs, and you're paying off all the departments who will have to give you a certain service in order to conduct this trial at your site. After deducting all of them, how much is left over in the pocket? So ideally, at least 20%, if not more, should be still left over after conducting of that study and paying all of the expenses. So that's the number you want to quote them, which is at least 20-25% higher. And that's after you have deducted all of your expenses and some cushion of unexpected things that might happen. Study might need to be renewed a few times. There might be amendments coming in. There might be unexpected events like that. Have some cushion. Count the overhead as well. So a lot of organizations, for their administrative purposes, their finance department purposes, and to cover their other costs, they charge PIs up to 20, 30, 40% of overhead. So you also have to deduct that overhead, deduct all of your costs, have the cushion, and then add 20 to 25%. So that is the number that you should be expecting to come in from pharma. If it hasn't come in yet, you have to tell your contracts team, you know what, we need to negotiate further, give me some more time. Now, negotiations sometimes are done at the PI level, but if you're an experienced study coordinator, I myself as a coordinator and as an associate have done a lot of negotiations before. So we will have a whole other video about how to do this kind of negotiations. But essentially, that's the point you would say, no, this contract is not ready to go through. If all the numbers match up, you've had a discussion with the PI and everything looks good from budget side, you can tell the contracts team, we're good to go. Similarly, there can be other aspects of the contract you should also review. While you might not be an expert in the legal matter, there can be issues such as, who takes the responsibility of reporting SAEs and PDs and stuff to REB versus who reports it to the regulatory authority. Who's conducting study monitoring visits and what are the expectations? Essentially, this is like a marriage contract between two organizations. And all of the expectations from each other should be outlined here. A lot of pharmas or CROs might actually go and give very rigid deadlines. If the study isn't completed by this date, like, we're going to pull this, we're only going to pay by this date, blah, blah, blah. So you obviously want to negotiate some flexibility there, because people who are really implementing studies at the site level know so many things can happen. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, all non-urgent, non-essential trials that didn't have existing patients recruited yet were just put on a standstill. They were all paused until it was safe to start having patients on site at the hospitals again. Right, only emergent services were really open at that time, and alternately elective surgeries and everything, elective appointments had been paused or moved to virtual. When you're doing a virtual session with your doctor, it's not really possible for the research coordinators to go in and consent patients during that time. So anything can really happen, and so you want to make sure there is room for flexibility in the contract. So these are some of the things that you would negotiate and look out for in the example that I gave regarding a pharma company. Now let's look at a different scenario. Okay, maybe you are not doing a trial. Maybe you are doing a study which involves health administrative data. Now data needs to be shared by another organization where this big study has been done, and now that organization, let's call it University A. So University A has done this study, and now you are partnering with University A to bring over some of that data, merge it with your data, and do broader analysis on a greater part of the population. University A is in a different city and province or state from you. You are organization B. So University A and organization B need to have a contract. So either party will then decide, okay, you guys send over a contract and my people will review it. So you can do it one way or the other. Usually it's the site leading the study project that will be initiating the contract going out. Once the contract comes in, again, you would similarly go through it, see if the financial expectations are met, timeline expectations are met, when data will be studied, and of course, what kind of data will be transferred between the organizations. Sometimes these are called DSAs. In this particular example, these are data sharing agreements. So instead of being called clinical trial or clinical study agreements, in this case, the contracts are called DSAs or data sharing agreements. There can be different terms, but essentially it has to clearly outline what kind of data is being transferred between these organizations, why, the justification, the method of transfer, how it's going to be safely stored to protect patients' privacy, confidentiality, and all of the identities, and what kind of expectation is there from each party. Does anything physically need to be returned? Is it all going to be done electronically? Is it going to be stored in a server? The purpose of it and how they will be receiving either remuneration, some kind of financial gain for having collected the data on behalf of organization B, or is organization A going to be a part of that publication that's going to come out and get authorship, or it's all being paid for by a grant. All of these things need to be outlined in this data sharing agreement. So this is another form of agreement between two organizations that you might come across as you're going to work as a clinical study coordinator or clinical research associate, clinical research assistant. So I hope this short video has given you just a glimpse of what kind of role you might have to play when it comes to the contract side of clinical research. As you're new, just make sure you tell people, I haven't done this before, I'd be happy to go through them, skim through them, leave some comments. Usually it is a team effort and nobody is going to hold you legally liable because there is going to be a legal team responsible. However, remember, while you're not a legal subject matter expert, you are an expert on your study and should know the logistics of it and the requirements of it. Run it through once in your mind, get a full picture of everything that can go wrong, and then try and prevent that by having some good language in place in the contract. So I hope this video has been helpful to you guys, and until next time, this was the Brown Feminist. Bye. Hey guys, before you go, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one career counseling services in clinical research. So if you do feel that beyond the videos and the emails where I answer all of your questions, you need a little bit more of hands-on support, you're not getting those interviews and you're not really sure why, or you just don't know how to handle certain questions because of your, you don't have all the experiences, but you know that you can do the job. If you need some additional help in resume building, cover letter design, interview prep, or just general career consultations, I do offer this service now live. Find out more by clicking the link below. I have a whole video where I explain what services I offer, and there's a form there if you would like to sign up. Until next time, this was the Brown Feminist. Bye!